All right, wanted to talk through a little bit of the background and mechanics in this exercise. I have you do justifying a project using a project selection matrix. The idea is if you're choosing among several projects, evaluate them by criteria, rank those criteria, and then you can come up with a number for each project, and it can be helpful then in deciding which project to pursue, assuming you kind of can't pursue them all. I have you read about it from the Project Management Institute guide. Does a little better job than our text. So kind of bear with it. And then I have you apply this particular exercise they have. The exercise has a lot of background, and I would read it. You can maybe go through the mechanics. Okay, but then you have some questions to answer, and it's not very long, but it's good. It's a way to sort of balance when you're kind of stuck with a decision and you have to take one alternative. It's a way to proceed. I would say the exercise of coming up with what are the important criteria, how does each choice, in this case it's project, but maybe it's a decision, how would each decision rank to those criteria? By going through that process, you will have done a lot of work in the analysis. The numerical outcome might be interesting and helpful. I wouldn't put as much weight in that as I would the thinking that goes on as you go through the process of thinking about it. One decision theorist kind of said when you get this and do the ranking, or if it come up and if you react and say, gosh, I don't like the outcome, that can be telling, right? Or if you say, gee, I can't decide, flip a coin, and don't necessarily do what the coin says, but if evaluate your reaction to, oh, well, I didn't like that, that might give you some insight into, if you're the sole person making the decision, what ought to be the right decision. Here, we're maybe in an organization and you're presenting it to a group, and so it's nice to have this for presentation and discussion purposes. And then, as we're going to do, if you put it in an Excel spreadsheet and some of the values change, you can see their effect. So, there's a good discussion, but the idea is they've got some projects that we've got to decide among, and they've come up with the, here are some criteria, okay, that are the criteria. These are some possible criteria that we ought to consider, right? We've looked at financial return, net present value. Maybe it's cost avoidance. Maybe we get market share. So, a lot of, startups and unicorns, they don't really care anything yet about financial return. They're about, capturing the market share. Amazon, well, Google for that matter too, didn't make money in their first several years. And I notice the WeWork guy is back. I watched that a little bit on TV. Same thing there. The idea is maybe get that, market share up, public perception. There are lots of things besides just the financial return that weigh in, and how do you balance these one against the other? So as this section I have you read says, well, select a few of the criteria, and they've done that for you here. Okay, so they, so we're helping them with their analysis and doing the write-up. So as I say, coming up with these factors and the weights in a project you're facing is really where you do a lot of the work. Crunching the numbers is the relatively easy part. But let's kind of play along. So out of all the possible criteria, they've come up with these, and they really in these weight factors. And to me, I think the weights are a little bit skewed, but this is 5 times as important as this. That is, the increased market share is the premier thing. Next, and we're going to use these as numeric values. So 1.25 times as important as that, but coming back is good financial return. Not as important as market share, but still important. Innovation, support the corporate culture, and public awareness, that's of a concern, but it's not nearly as important. In fact, it's 1/5 as important by their weights as increasing market share. And so you could quote, it doesn't hurt to have 2 of these tie that maybe, these are both equally important in our eyes, and go from there. So the idea is they have some projects they're going to evaluate. But first, or along with looking at the projects, they think about what are the important aspects, right? Then they have 3 different projects in this particular exercise that they're considering: a kiosk project, a financial advisor project, and a franchise project. Okay, and they've done then the work, and this is a lot of work, and said, the kiosk project rates a 5 on the increased market share, whereas they feel like this financial project rates a 7 on increased market share, and the franchise project rates a 7 also. And so for the criteria they've chosen, they've looked at each project and rated it on each of those criteria. It looks like maybe a scale of 1 to 10. I see a 9 here. Bangs out innovation. This is a very innovative idea. Okay, so the question, or where I have you come then in the exercise that you're doing, is how to put all this together. And I give you some guidance in the exercise, but I'm going to show you, kind of what your answer should look like. And we'll be doing another project evaluation matrix in the future for a project where you get to come up with the weights, so no problem here. So this is just good old Excel. A little bit of formatting, but the idea is we have these alternatives. I've kind of put it across the columns. That's how they laid it out in the book. You could have that transposed if you wanted. So we have the kiosks. These are the different projects. Down here are the different criteria they identified. So what's nice about this, at least can represent the information back to the user. And if you look closely, that the 77436, all I did was take 77436, put in their rankings for what they thought the franchise project was worth, and it should say kiosk. Great. That's autosave. Save that guide. So little typo. Okay, so far all we're doing, these are plug numbers. We're representing the data, and I've also put in the weights that they have applied to them. If they're all equally weighted, we could just add this. But what we want to do is take this times this, plus this times this, plus this times this. That's sort of the weighted average, and come up with a weighted average score for the kiosk project. And we could write a complicated formula, but something that you ought to be familiar with is the sum product function. I'm highlighting the weights, okay, and then I'm pressing F4 to give this absolute addressing. You should remember from your Excel class that absolute addressing means if I copy or move that formula, then those references stay static. So they're fixed on the weights. I'm going to copy this formula over to these other columns, and but when I copy it, the weights stay kind of still. They're static. An absolute reference, these are called relative references. They should change as I move it. But what sum product does is take this times this plus this times this plus this times this and adds them all up. And so we get a total of 86 for this project. I'm going to paste just the formulas. That keeps the formatting going here. For these others, and now you kind of see the answer. The franchise just edges out the kiosk by these weights and these values, and kind of a distant third is the financial advisor. And there is a function that I ask you to do. So you're going to reproduce this. I am kind of giving kind of the what you have to do, but and we've got to decide. So it's this rank EQ, which it's a ranking function. What you do is you put in the cell you'd like to know what the rank is. Then you put a comma, and then the cells that represent, well, what's the list of numbers that this is part of that I want to make a rank from, like is this first, second, or third, and then you decide whether you want that to be an ascending rank or a descending. I'm going to make it ascending, meaning number 1 is the first choice, and 2 is the second choice, and 3 is the third choice. I can see it as going other ways. So if it wasn't clear from the just looking at the numbers, maybe if we had 15 projects going across, or there were fractions or something, there is the ranking, and you can answer the question from that. But the idea is for you to understand how this works, and you've got to do an analysis and a write-up from here in addition to reproducing this worksheet. But as I said, everything else was just layout and formatting. If your layout's a little different, I use some centering and some merging and that kind of thing to get a layout, I found. But these functions were a little maybe esoteric, so I wanted to see them in action. And then you get to reproduce it, and we'll do something in the future. Oh, and by the way, you can then embed this spreadsheet. If you go look at what the assignment asks you to do, embed the spreadsheet. But your real value added is to prepare a document that discusses it, and along the way answers these questions, and provide a presentation for it. All right, so it was kind of something where the mechanics were just enough that I kind of felt I needed to unpack it a little bit. So good luck finishing that when you get there.